and welcome to Conversations with the Candidates. I'm your host, Wes Slate, former city councilor, vice president of the council, and retired city clerk. And I'll be doing the interviews with the 5 candidates for councilor at large who will represent the entire city after our election in November. I'm happy to introduce Will Cosmas, who's a candidate for councilor at large. Will, welcome.
Thank you, Wes. Good to see you.
Tell me why you're running and your interest in the job.
Well, there are a couple of answers to that question.
Give me the short one.
Well, thanks. First of all, thank you for having me. First of all, I'm a homeowner. I'm a father. I've got 2 kids in the public schools. I'm a small business owner. I have a law firm over in the Cummings Center. My mom lives in our first floor apartment at our house on Washington Street. I'm bought into Beverly, and I want to make it a better place. And shortly after I opened my law firm, I got a call from a friend about who had written an article in the Salem News about a toxic waste spill in her neighborhood that hadn't been cleaned up fully yet. And she said, "Can you help?" And I said, "Well, geez, I'm a business litigator. I don't know." But after that conversation and a couple strokes of luck, a neighborhood group was formed to work with the city and the state and the responsible company to try to get to a solution. And I've been advising them on a voluntary basis since about November, December.
Remind me, Will, the name of the group is?
Is Voices of Concern North Beverly. And working with them really showed me that and inspired me to run, because it showed me that I could use my skills as a litigator and an advocate to serve the city and my neighbors and my friends.
Great. You missed one thing in your intro, and that was your wife Karen, who I know is no stranger to politics. So
she is
give
not.
Karen a pitch first.
My wife is wonderful and very patient and brilliant, and she has worked in politics for much of her career. She's run campaigns. Actually, she's the reason why we ended up in Beverly in the first place 7 years ago.
Well, as you know, I've got some questions which I'll pose to all 5 candidates, so you're going to hear the same ones that everyone else does.
Okay.
The candidate who receives the most votes by our charter in Beverly becomes council president for the next 2 years. What's your view of that position? How do you see the council president relating to the mayor, their administration, the residents and the businesses of Beverly, and to the other councilors?
Well, the council president is obviously the head of the city council, and I think that all councilors should be proactive in their jobs and reach out to people, especially the council president. I understand that the council president organizes the meetings and runs them. I think that the council president should be a primary liaison with the mayor. Mm-hmm. There are things that, there are some things I don't know necessarily about how the council works on the inside, but I think it's a leadership role in the city, and it needs to be. And that's how the council interfaces with everybody else.
The other aspect, and we had an example of this in Boston, is that in the absence of the mayor, if the mayor goes away for more than 3 days, or if the mayor is unable to discharge the duties of the office, the council president becomes acting mayor. And Beverly's unique in that because, along with Boston, because it's someone who's run citywide as you are, not a ward councilor who only represents 1/6 of the city. Beverly Main Streets has a new executive director, or will shortly. What role do you see that person and that organization playing in the future of the city? And there's also the Greater Beverly Chamber of Commerce. How do you see those 2 organizations dealing with the city and the council?
Well, I actually had the pleasure of meeting with Leslie Gould at the Greater Beverly Chamber of Commerce yesterday to get a sense of what the business community's concerns were. And we had a great conversation. I think that Beverly Main Streets has shown itself to be essential in the growth of Cabot Street. I live downtown, so I see these things every day. All the great work they do between the block parties and the festivals they put on, but also supporting the business community there. You only have to look as far as the Jersey barriers for outdoor seating for the restaurants that they did that really added some life to our community during COVID. And I know that from my conversation with Ms. Gould at the Chamber, that the business community is looking to become more involved and to get a seat at the table, or at least to be consulted as part of the process on issues that affect them. And that makes sense. The businesses are a part of our community and should be consulted and spoken to, or have a temperature taken at least.
Good. Beverly's also home to Endicott College and Montserrat College of Art, and then the Cabot, the LARCOM, and North Shore Music Theater. What role do you see those institutions having in the city?
Those institutions are essential. I'll tell you, when we moved to Beverly from Davis Square in Somerville, and I have to say I was concerned. I thought, we're going to move to the suburbs, and I'm going to lose out on all the cool cultural aspects of living in Somerville, Cambridge. Before then, before law school in 2004, I had lived in New York City, another kind of cultural cool area. And then we got up here, and all of a sudden, there was all this cultural cool stuff happening in Beverly. I think it gives the community real life, real vitality. It makes us more of a dynamic community. It helps our businesses by bringing people up to go to a show at the Cabot and going to a restaurant. And it makes us stronger to have those things. It makes us unique. And I'm personally, I'm couldn't be happier that they're a part of the community. And I think that they really need to stay a part of the community and be a strong part of the community. Development
has been a big issue in Beverly for quite a while. How much development, where it goes, and what type. Short answer, your views on development in the future, going forward.
Well, I've certainly heard about development knocking on doors, Wes. And I think that the key is responsible development. I think that we have a very thoughtful master plan that was put together over a long period of time with a great deal of public involvement. But we also need to make sure that whatever is built as that master plan is implemented is done in a responsible way that takes into account the community that surrounds it, this wonderful city that we have, the beauty of our city, takes into account the fact there are other people who live in the city already, who need places to park, for example. Living downtown, I run into that. I can walk places, but my 76-year-old mom, sorry, Mom, again, it's tougher for her.
Sure.
So we need to figure out how they fit aesthetically, demographically, in terms of making sure we have affordable housing for people, and from a standpoint of what our needs are as a community and what our goals are.
Okay. Along those lines, Beverly's waterfront is a work in progress, to be generous. What do you see happening on the waterfront in the near term, long term?
Well, I know that the next area of targeted area of development is the Bass River waterfront. I was on a Zoom meeting with about 99 other people last week about the proposed zoning overlay. And we should be taking advantage of our waterfront property because, first of all, we need to make sure that we're preparing for climate change. So we need to make sure that those areas are developed and prepared in terms of infrastructure. We also need to preserve our open spaces. We need to give more people access to the waterfront so they can enjoy the beauty of Beverly. And, we also have areas that could be more productive. So we need to, but again, we need to be responsible as we do it.
I had a climate change question, but I'll skip that one and just say, because since you mentioned it. What was your reaction to the recent incident of overt racism at the school committee meeting last month? Do you think systemic racism is present in Beverly, and what can the council do about that?
I was shocked, and I was appalled. I am a big believer in treating people with dignity and respect and the inherent dignity of other people. And I believe that diversity gives any community strength. So to see that on display was appalling. And what I think the council can do about it is a more complicated question because, as President Kennedy said back in the 60s, this is a moral issue. And we have to confront it as such. I think that the city's done a great thing by starting these DEI initiatives, diversity and inclusion initiatives, and we need to support that. We also need to work on a community level to try to open people's minds and to help convince them that a more diverse and dynamic Beverly might look a little different than it did before, but it could be a stronger community than it was.
How effective do you think city government generally is in communicating with residents, and what steps can be taken to improve communication? As a resident and a business owner, you may have a different perspective as you might as a councilor, but communication with residents and businesses by city government.
Well, I know that my mom and my family really appreciated the calls from Mayor Cahill during the COVID epidemic with the updates. Those were great. I think the city could be more effective communicating with its residents. I went on the other day and realized I could sign up for email updates from different committees, but I had to kind of figure that out on my own.
Right.
We live in an age where people are used to and accustomed to, and properly so, to being able to communicate more easily with their government. And I think that we should look into ways to do that.
Beverly's completed many capital projects, from the schools, all the schools, to the new police station that just opened. What do you think the next big project should be?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things that are really going to be important. One is to make sure that our infrastructure, especially our storm drains and our sewerage systems, are prepared for climate change, as I mentioned. The storms of the century are becoming the storms of every other year. And all you had to do is be around in the last couple months to see the flooding that can take place if the system isn't working right.
Yep.
And we have to realize we're a coastal city where these things are going to happen. We're going to have stronger and stronger storms. But I also know the middle school is beautiful. It's nicer than Georgetown was when I was there. and you know, because our community has grown, which is great, some of those class sizes are outgrowing the size of the high school. So we're going to need to really think about how we can expand the high school so that people's educational experience doesn't get detracted because they have to, let's say, learn in trailers or something like that. We're a better community than that. And
It was not long ago that Beverly's school enrollment numbers were going down, but for the last few years, probably because of the investment the city made in the schools, our numbers are up. As you said, we have the embarrassment of riches of new buildings and newly redone buildings, and that leads to crowding. So
yeah,
that's an issue that's got to be dealt with. Beverly's going to celebrate 400 years since its settlement, along with Salem at the same year, in 1626, 5 years from now. How do you think the city could prepare for that big event, 400 years?
Well, 400 years is a long time, and it deserves a celebration. As I said the last time I was in the studio, actually, it was about 400 years ago when people settled here, and there's a lot that we can learn from their mistakes. There's a lot, though, that we should hold on to in terms of their optimism and their grit, and their sense of community coming together. And I think, 150 years later, they were shooting at British boats in the harbor. And I think that we should celebrate Beverly's history. It'd be really neat to have some sort of a celebration or reenactment around Independence Park, which is near where we both live, to commemorate that event. I think it's pretty cool. I'm kind of a history nerd. But there are other ways we can celebrate Beverly and really the community that we've built over these 400 years together. And I would love to see more of a to-do about it.
You're running for councilor at large, Will, which you would represent the whole city. I've always felt anecdotally that councilors at large represent everyone, but really don't represent anyone directly. Whereas a ward councilor, you know exactly whom you represent. How do you see the difference in those two roles? You'd be one of 3 at-large councilors and 6 ward councilors. Mm-hmm. How do you see those two roles being similar and being different?
Well, I've talked to a couple councilors about that, and it is right. You represent the whole city, and that's important to remember. There are different parts of this city. Some people say it's a city composed of 5 or 6 different little cities. It's important, though, that we remain a cohesive community. I see that we're still responsible to constituents everywhere, that complaints that maybe are directed at ward councilors, for example. I spoke to one ward councilor who said, one of the things that I do is if I can't get a complaint resolved, I'll talk to one of the councilors at large. And it's to be the voice of everyone, but also to amplify voices within the different wards that don't get heard, and to find a way to lead the city forward together.
The mayor of Beverly, since the charter was rewritten in the mid-90s, we have a strong mayor form of government, regardless of who sits in that seat. The old Board of Aldermen, back before the charter was changed, really ran the city, hired people, fired people, promoted people, did really everything. There was a mayor, but the job was very different than it is now. The council, though, elects the city clerk, who runs that office. And also Beverly has a unique position called a budget management analyst. Used to be Kathy Griffin. The last couple of years it's been Jerry Perry, who worked for the council. The budget management analyst has access to all city records. All city departments can look into all the municipal finance numbers, can talk to anyone as an employee of the council and an advisor to the council. How do you see those two jobs that really are unique to working for the council, that you would use them, or you see those jobs as opposed to other city departments, city agencies that ultimately report to the mayor?
Well, I think it's important to have positions like those to serve as something of a check on the executive, if we want to go back to basic civics class. I think that in law school they taught us in one of the Supreme Court cases that sunshine's the ultimate disinfectant. I believe that transparency is really important in everything we do. And to the extent that we can have people who can aid us in gaining greater transparency, then that's fantastic. And we should take full advantage of that. I don't know what the new city charter is going to say about the different roles and how things might change. But I'm a strong believer in what they call soft power in diplomacy and working with people. It's one of the things I've had to learn as a litigator, is to learn how to negotiate and to work with people who I might not agree with on an issue and to come to a solution. And in this case, we tend to be working for the same client, which is the city of Beverly, to make it an even better place.
I will take a minute more on climate change and just ask you, as you said, as a coastal community, climate change may affect us greatly in the long or even near term. What more than you said before, a little more? We had a little bit more time. What should the city be doing to address this short term and long term? You mentioned a couple of things, but
well, yeah. Certainly, we need to make sure our infrastructure can be up to the task of dealing with climate change, with the greater weather events that we're going to have. And that goes from making sure that our public spaces are sustainably maintained, that we have the resources in place to keep them there, because it's important to have public spaces, obviously. We also should be doing our part to mitigate our impact on climate change. There's no reason why we can't work to let's say, retrofit older buildings in Beverly with green technology, or municipal buildings with green technology, or require that any new buildings that are built in Beverly use green technology and the most efficient technologies that they can to heat themselves, and to that they're also, this is tangentially related to climate change, but they also allow their tenants to recycle through them.
Right.
But the time for not doing anything is past. And I have two kids. They go to Beverly Public Schools, and we're leaving this world to them, and we need to do our part. However small it is in the grand scheme, as a coastal city, especially to mitigate our impact on the rest of the world, and to.
As a candidate and a resident, I had a couple of reactions to the fact that on the primary day preliminary election, citywide, the turnout was a little different in the 6 wards, but overall it was about 7%, which meant that 93% of the eligible voters in Beverly did not cast a vote. There was a citywide primary for mayor, as you know. The only ward primary was in Ward 3 for Ward 3 councilor, but I have some understanding of what it takes to be a candidate and to run for office. As a candidate yourself, what was your reaction to that, and how do you work toward getting your people that would support you, to show up on election day in a couple of weeks and cast a ballot when typically turnout in local elections is low, although that was extremely low?
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a little discouraging. I think there's a few things that were at play in that you mentioned, between the fact there's only one ward primary and then the primary for mayor, and I think that frankly people are kind of tired after COVID and after the 2020 election. I think that voting is essential, though. I've been trying to get people out to vote since I was in college, and it's a right that people have fought and died for. Like I mentioned, people were shooting on the Independence Park for the right to vote, and people have been fighting for the right to vote, but they're still fighting for the right to vote. And it's an essential part of our democracy. So how do we get people out to vote? My wife has a handle on that. She's my campaign manager, Wes. And hopefully they'll be excited to take part in our democracy. I think it's a civic responsibility.
It's always been ironic to me that local government, which you're interested in and I served in a couple of different positions, really touches people most directly, and we're very accessible. We shop in the same stores and travel the same roads, and our families are involved in the same activities as our neighbors, and why that doesn't necessarily translate into interest in local elections is something I've never really understood. But
yeah,
we're gonna post a graphic at the end of the show with the dates of deadline for registration for the fall election. I know the clerk's office is going to conduct a day of a morning of early voting before the election itself. Absentee ballots are available, so you can, once the clerk's office receives the ballots for the election, you can literally go to City Hall and cast an absentee ballot if you won't be available for a number of specific reasons on Election Day.
And I think that's all fantastic. I think we should be making it as easy as possible for people to vote, and not just because I'm a candidate. You're right, municipal government is where the rubber meets the road, literally, for a lot of people. And our last election, I looked it up, we were somewhere around 17 or 20% turnout. And people need to realize that there are real issues that affect them on a day-to-day basis. It's one of the reasons why I'm running. You can have a briefing book as big as one of those old Oxford dictionaries, but unless you're living your life day to day in a community with different touch points in different areas of the community, it's really hard to know how it's going to affect people.
Well, we're wrapping up now, Will, but I want to give you a couple of minutes to look directly at the camera and your constituents, potential constituents, and make your pitch for why you're running and why you'd like their vote on Election Day.
Okay. Thank you, Wes, and thank you for having me, and thank you for putting up that election information. It's really important. You really should go out and vote. It's an essential part of our democracy, as I mentioned, and our responsibility that we have as citizens. My name is Will Cosmas, as it says on your screen. I'm an attorney, I'm a husband, I'm an advocate, I'm a father of 2 kids in the public schools, I'm a homeowner. I've lived here for 7 years with my wife and my kids and my mom in our first floor apartment, and we've really fallen in love with this community. I've got a law office in the Cummings Center, and I'm really bought in. And I want to make Beverly an even better place than it is, and to continue the upswing that we've loved to be a part of since we moved here as part of a dynamic community. And I want to use my skills as a litigator to bring to the City Council to be able to help guide us through these times that are exciting, but where we're facing a lot of important decisions about the direction of the city, how we're going to grow, how we're going to act as a community. Part of my training is to read through dense documents and figure out what they mean and how to advocate about them and to advocate for different positions in people. And working with the VOC North Beverly group has shown me that I can really use those skills to help my fellow citizens, to help my residents, to help my friends in real ways that affect their daily lives. And so that's why I'm running. That's what inspired me to run. And I hope that if you believe in a stronger, dynamic, more resilient Beverly in the future, that you will consider voting for me.
Well, that's great. Thanks very much, Will.
Thank you, Wes.
Appreciate you coming today, and
Thank you.
Good luck in the election.
Thank you.
Again, we'll post, this has been Conversations with the Candidates, Will Cosmas, and thanks for tuning in. We'll have information up on the screen relevant to the election. Thanks again.